Hanay na orasa ya inire Isabela.
Na orasa.
Ya aimaha Eliana ora iraran aima eni.
Di irasa. Ta ya aini ha elia rai ora.
Ya aimaha eilu.
Ei emne?
Hanane ya lai liawaite ha eg naigo yai.
Naigo. Ta na ira.
Great. In order to talk about the weather, we'll need the word for weather first, right?
Adira.
Well, the word for weather is naigo. It consists of nai, which means situation, and go, which means natural or nature. So, naigo is the natural situation, the nature condition, or simply the weather. You can simply add ne to turn this into an inquiry.
Naigo ne?
What's the weather like? So, that's just the question.
Naigo ne?
Exactly.
Ta ya ema ha naigo ne.
Oh, right. Well, to answer your question, of course it depends on what the weather's actually like. Let's go over some vocabulary words together with which I can express what the weather's like. Let's start with temperature. Those among you viewers who've seen the entire series, you ought to know which word we'll need. Any ideas? Those of you who guessed zu, you were correct. Zu is a class 2 root word, meaning it can receive qualifier suffixes. This way we could build, for example,
Zu aira.
Cold. Since there are 5 qualifiers, it should come as no surprise that we can also create
Zu ara, zu era, zu ira,
and
zu ora.
To any of these words, you can prefix a topic marker ha to answer the question. For example,
Ha zu era.
It's moderately warm, or more literally, there is moderate temperature. Now, of course, anything can have moderate temperature. In case you'd like to specify that you're talking about the weather, you can prefix the word for weather to this construction.
Ha naigo zu era.
The weather has moderate temperature, or there is moderately temperatured weather. Next, let's talk about cloudiness. I've said several times that ILIS is all about grabbing your tools, which are the root words in the inventory, from the toolbox and build stuff with it. So, which tools will we need to talk about clouds? Well, the most important part is probably
Deo.
air. To this, we're going to prefix
An.
a place. Since we realized in video 39 that an actually also behaves as a partition marker, we can interpret it as a preposition. Therefore,
An deo.
can be understood to mean in the air, or, by extension, in the sky. And that's good because clouds are in the sky. But what are clouds? Well, they're pockets of water in the sky, aren't they? So we'll definitely need the word goe as well.
Goe an deo.
Water in the sky. And finally, we'll prefix the root word which means a shape. Clouds are watery shapes in the sky or bodies of water in the sky. Therefore,
Goe an deo.
a watery airspace body, a cloud. Again, simply according to ILIS's syntax rules, we can prefix ha to turn this into a full sentence.
Ha goe an deo.
There's a cloud. But that semantically usually doesn't satisfy the question. After all, we'll want to say how cloudy it is. In other words, we'll want to say how many clouds there are. So we can prefix a quantity word, like for example ka'ira, to say
Ha ka'ira goe an deo.
there are many clouds, it is cloudy.
Ha ka'ora goe an deo.
There's a buttload of clouds, it is very cloudy. Now I'd like you to take a closer look at the structure of this word. The quantity word ka'ira is linked to the shape or body. So this means that there are many pockets of water in the sky. There is a very high amount of watery sky shapes. But due to the workings of the ILIS morphology, we're free to link the quantity word to something else as well. So how about we connect it to an instead? This way, we don't express that there are a ton of clouds per se, but that there are clouds in all the places. Now think about the difference between the two. In the word on the left, you have a ton of shapes in the sky. The bodies are distinguishable as such.
Ha ka ora goe andeo?
There are a ton of clouds in the sky. On the contrary,
Ha goe ka ora andeo?
means that you perceive an unspecified number of watery bodies in the sky, potentially only one, but it covers the entire place. This invokes a different image, a different kind of cloudiness. The kind where clouds cover the entire sky like a veil, and the clouds themselves are no longer countable as individual pockets of water. Right? I feel like I can't stress enough that Eilis invites you, basically forces you, to think about what you're actually saying. Many clouds in the sky denotes a different kind of weather phenomenon than an indistinct number of clouds that covers the entire area. So also here, using exactly the same tools from the toolbox but assembling them differently yields different results. Alright? Okay, so enough with the clouds now. Let's talk about wind. What is wind? Well, of course, we'll start with deo, air. But not just any air. Wind is just air molecules moving about. So to the air, we'll add uaira, a high dynamic in the air. Uaira deo, wind. In this case, the root word order doesn't really matter. Deo uaira means that you have restless or dynamic air, while uaira deo means that you have an air-related turbulence or restlessness. Both come down to the same thing, so it doesn't matter. Now, in order to say how windy it is, we'll need to rely on the Liska magic inside the qualifier. We can intensify the wind by turning the Liska, I, into something else.
Deo oai ara?
There's stillness or no dynamic in the air, no wind at all.
Deo oai aira?
There's some dynamic in the air, but not much, a breeze.
Deo oai era?
There's quite some dynamic in the air, a moderate wind.
Deo oai ira?
There's a lot of dynamic in the air, a noticeably strong wind.
Deo oai ora?
There's a ton of dynamic in the air, a fierce wind or even a storm. So again, you can add the topic marker to answer the initial question. What's the weather like? Ha deo oai ora. It's storming. If you would like, nothing impedes you to specify that the violently turbulent air is a weather pattern. So, ha naigo deo oai ora. The weather is stormy. Next, let's talk about rain. Where I live, we get a lot of that. So, what is rain? Obviously, it's goe, water. And what kind of water? Let's make it easy on ourselves and not dive into the meteorological details of how rain forms. We'll just say where it comes from, because it never rains from the ground up. So we'll add li, the origin marker. To that, we add a spatial construction like we first discussed in video 6. An, eda, ora. Li is a partition marker, which means we can translate it as a preposition. Water from high up. Water from the top. Rain. Therefore,
Ha goe li aneda ora?
It's raining. Now, Eilis is highly context sensitive, and since the word goe li an eda ora means nothing more than that there's water pouring down from a high altitude, this word might also be the word for a waterfall, for example, or perhaps even not a natural phenomenon at all, but for instance a shower, the man-made kind, the one in your bathroom. So if context requires it, again you can specify that the water is weather-related.
Ha naigo goe li aneda ora?
It is not a waterfall or a shower, but unambiguously the weather phenomenon, rain. Next, let's talk about other kinds of precipitation, hail and snow. This will be a bit more complex. We'll still primarily be talking about water, but we'll need to add 3 units of info to it. The water comes from above, the water is weather-related, and the water is in the first chemical state of matter, which is solid. I think we encountered the root word tu when we spoke about nu ainai tu, solid nutrition or food, versus nu enai tu, liquid nutrition or beverage. So how will we link these units to the water? Well, notice that 2 of these words contain the word for situation, nai. So is there any way we can condense it somehow? Well, if we just added go to ainai tu, That would mean the first state of matter of nature, the natural first state of matter. In other words, a nature-related solid. And that suffices if you ask me. So we just take the particle go and stick it at the end of the other.
Ainai tu go.
The first state of natural matter. Also here, the word order may switch to create, for example,
Ainai go tu.
Here, nature is linked directly to the first state, so we get something like the first chemistry-related weather state or something. It boils down to the same thing. So this way we can bring down our 3 informational components to 2. Next, keep in mind that li is a partition marker, so we may just bind that to the other word without creating any ambiguities on the morphological level.
Ainai tu go li an eda ora.
A solid related to nature coming from high up. And now we're left with a single informational unit that we can bind to the water.
Goe. Goe ainai tu. Goe ainai tu. Goe ainai tu. Goe ainai tu go. Goe ainai tu go li. Goe ainai tu go li an eda ora.
And that's the word for hail. We can ask ourselves whether or not we can't kick out go in this word. After all, how many contexts can you think of where there is ice coming from above if you're not talking about the weather? I can't, so let's get go out of here.
Goe ainai tu li an eda ora.
I've hinted at it before, and it basically holds true for any other language next to Ailis. The fewer words you have to use to express yourself, the more efficient your communication is going to be. So if you don't necessarily need a certain root word to get your point across in Ailis, simply don't say it. So, that's hail. Now, how can we go from hail to snow? I'm sure some of you have already figured it out. Liska magic. If we defined ice as solid water, then we can define snow as semi-solid water. And just like you can combine Liska in other word types we've seen pass by over the course of the series, also here you can combine the Liska of ainaitu, meaning solid, and enaitu, meaning liquid, to form ai enaitu, semi-solid or semi-liquid.
Goe ai enai tu li an eda ora.
Snow. Finally, we haven't said anything about the type of weather that many people, if not most, prefer. The sun. So how would you express that it's a sunny day? Well, in one of our previous videos, we saw the word for sun,
Zan uaite.
which means our star. We can simply slap on a topic marker to say that it's sunny.
Hazan waite.
This is a valid sentence, but a native Ailis speaker, which I hope one day will exist, wouldn't say it this way. The word
Zan uaite.
our star, has more of an astronomical ring to it. For some reason, maybe because the sun isn't part of the Earth's atmosphere and therefore seen as an external player to our weather patterns, this word wouldn't be used to describe the weather. Instead, an Ailis speaker will likely resort to saying it's a bright day.
Hadai ira.
There is brightness. Again, a lamp can also be bright. Many other things can be bright. So if context requires it, add the word for weather again.
Hanaigo dai ira. Hanaigo dai ira yido. Hadai ira yido.
All of these formulations are good candidates to express that the sun is shining, it's a sunny day. Then let's go from weather to climate. Observant viewers who remember video 29 about the powerhouses of the lexicon might remember the root word lis, the very same as in Ailis. You can prefix it to a word in order to create an umbrella term, potentially a paradigm or meta word. You can employ the same strategy for the word naigo. If you prefix lis to it, you can denote a group of weather situations, the weather spectrum, in other words, climate. To this word, you can add adjectives like warm or cold, wet or dry, and so on, to speak about the kind of climate you live in. So,
Lis naigo.
climate. Alright? Next, let's try to conjure up a word for season. Any ideas? You may come up with alternatives that I'm not thinking of, And if you do, let me know in the comments. But we are going with at, which means frequency, repetition, iteration, or in this context, perhaps a more suitable translation would be cycle.
At naigo.
Is a weather cycle. We could additionally throw in the word ku, meaning year.
At ku naigo.
A yearly or annual weather cycle. But this is still not the word for season. It is a word denoting the sum of seasons in a year. So to speak about a season in particular, we can prefix the root word gae.
Gae at ku naigo.
A season's instance. A season. There. I think that should do for this topic. I hope this video has not only helped expand your vocabulary on the Ailsa language, but also brought you a step closer to getting the hang of how you can juggle with root words, mixing and matching until you get the desired output. I not only wish to thank Isabel for yet another excellent assistance, but also thank you again for watching.
Hanay na ora!